All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started now that we're at time. I just want to start off saying my name's Kato and I'm here with Pearson on the events team, and I'm going to be helping to moderate this along with Rachel Schrober from Pearson as well. Just want to say thank you so much for being here. This is our first book club that we have done, and we're super excited to have you here with us live. Today's session is focused on the Dan Fitzpatrick's The AI Classroom, The Ultimate Guide to Artificial Intelligence in Education. So before we get started, I just want to cover a few logistical items, and then I'll turn it over to our authors here who are going to lead the discussion. We are recording this session, so if you don't want to be recorded, please just keep your webcam off so you will not be recorded at any time. We also want to ask that you please keep your microphone muted. We did do this as a meeting, so at the end you can have the opportunity to come off mute and ask them some questions. But during the discussion part, we just want to make sure that everyone's muted so we don't have any background noise during the conversation. Like I said, at the end, we will get to some questions, and you're more than welcome to type your questions into the chat at any time throughout the session today. And then if you do want to come off mute and ask a question or say a comment, you're more than welcome to. We just ask that you use that raise your hand feature that you can access here on Zoom. Just go down to the bottom of your screen, and you'll also see you can turn the captions on and off. You can hide them. You can add some emojis, but there's a raise your hand feature that we're going to encourage you to use. And like I said, all throughout the session, please use the chat feature. We have it on, and we want to encourage you to use that to add comments and questions at any time. And if you have any technical questions or anything, feel free to directly chat me, Kate. So with that said, let me introduce our authors for today. So we have Richard Johnson-Sheehan as a professor of rhetoric and professional writing at Purdue University. Previously, he was a technical writer, editor in the electronics industry, and he worked as a grant writer in the arts. He is the owner of Theranos, a company that does technical writing and editing and communication consulting in scientific and technical fields. He is also currently working with the Foundry, a startup incubator for scientists and engineers at Purdue University. He has written numerous books, including Technical Communication Today, Writing Proposals, Writing Today, Argument Today, and Strategies for Technical Communication Today, excuse me. He has also written many articles about the rhetoric and history of science, as well as technical communication. He is a longtime member of the Society for Technical Communication, and he is a fellow of the Association of Teachers of Technical Communication. So thank you for being here today, Richard. And let me introduce Charles Paine, or Chuck. He is a professor of English at the University of New Mexico, where he directs the core of writing and the rhetoric of writing programs. He teaches first-year composition and courses in writing pedagogy, the history of rhetoric and composition, and many other areas. His published books span a variety of topics in rhetoric and composition, including The Resistant Writer, A History of Composition Studies, Teaching with Student Text, a co-edited collection of essays on teaching writing, and Argument Today, an argument-based textbook. So he is an active member of the Council of Writing Program Administrators. He has served on its executive board and as a co-leader of the WPA Summer Conference Workshop. He co-founded and coordinates the Consortium for the Study of Writing in College, a joint effort of the National Survey of Student Engagement and the Council of Writing Program Administrators. The consortium conducts general research into the ways that undergraduate writing can lead to enhanced learning, engagement, and other gains related to student success. So I just want to say thank you both so much for being here and leading this discussion. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to you guys because you know a whole lot more about this topic than I do.
Okay, well, hello, and thanks for joining us, everyone. Many of us are sitting in sweltering heat right now, so maybe this is a good use of our time. But just to start kind of giving some context, we've been working on the 5th edition of Writing Today. That's the book that Chuck and I co-author. And, we've been right in the middle of that, of course, that about 6 months ago, of course, ChatGPT jumps out there. And we were debating, do we talk about this? Is this something we want to incorporate into a first-year college book on college writing? And we just got to a point where we're like, well, we better pull this back and start trying to think about this. and how we're actually going to, how people should be incorporated into their teaching, and how maybe students might even use this in a way that we feel is acceptable. So we did a lot of, buying, getting books, trying to collect as much information as we could. And we came across this book, The AI Classroom, The Ultimate Guide to Artificial Intelligence in Education. It seemed to kind of stand out. It had some really good advice. It was written at a level we felt people could understand, including us, because there's a lot of really complicated stuff out there. And so we were trying to figure out, well, what gives us things we can use right now? And so we got going. We're not AI experts. So we've done a lot of reading. We've been playing a lot with ChatGPT, MS Copilot, MS Bing's AI chatbot, Grammarly, everything we can get our hands on. We haven't had a chance to use Google Bard or Meta's Llama yet, so we don't know what those are going to bring to us, but they're supposed to be quite the advance. And we're just hoping to get a conversation going today and help people see how it might fit into their teaching. If you're like us, we're teaching this fall ourselves. You're probably wondering, how's this going to work? How's this going to fit? What are students going to do? And we've kind of come to a determination that we're not going to be able to stop this AI train. So we're trying to figure out how to incorporate this new technology into our teaching and help students figure out how it's going to be part of their lives. So, and this seems like something that instructors at all levels, K through 20 through 12 or 20, are going to be preparing their students for the world. So we want them to be able to thrive in the workplace and in their civic life. The world they're going into is going to be one where AI already exists, and it's only going to be a tool that people use and hopefully use to do their jobs better. So we're hoping to teach them how to use these tools responsibly, effectively, and ethically. All right. Today, this slide shows we're going to have a little opening. That's what I'm doing right now. And then we're going to talk about ways to think about AI in writing. Talk about some strategies for outsourcing your doing, not your thinking, which is a theme of the book, and then how to use AI in classes. And then we'll leave some time for Q&A and any comments that you folks have. And I should point out that you're welcome to put comments in the chat, questions, and send them along, and our moderators will kind of put them together and maybe butt in occasionally and ask us these questions. So we can take your questions as we're going. So, all right, Chuck, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, I just want to stress, we're still figuring this out too, we've read a lot about it, but the proof is going to be when we actually take this into our classrooms and see how it works and what we can't do. But I thought I'd start with a little bit of snarkiness here and about predicting what it's going to do. As I said, we don't know what it's going to do. I don't think anybody really knows how to do. As Yogi Berra says, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So, and I have a couple of quotes that turned out not to be right, and that the internet was just a passing fad. And I thought, I went online and I found a couple old clips from 1994 and 1995, which illustrate just how humorously we got things wrong. We had no idea what these things could do. What are they going to be good for? So I hope you can hear this clip right here.
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big? How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
And what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
Sure.
What the hell is that exactly?
Well, it's become a place where people are publishing information.
Right.
So everybody can have their own homepage. Companies are there. The latest information. It's wild what's going on. You can send electronic mail to people. It is the big new thing.
Yeah, but it's easy to criticize something you don't fully understand, which is my position here.
Go ahead.
But I can remember a couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell? You know what I mean?
There's a difference.
There's a difference.
It's not a huge difference.
What is the difference?
But you can listen to the baseball game whenever you want.
Right.
Too.
Oh, I see. So it's stored in one of your memory deals.
Exactly.
And then you can
That's
come
the
back
way
to
I'm
your later.
talking about earlier.
Yeah. Do tape recorders ring a bell? Yeah, I just don't know. What can you, just knowing me the little you know me now, what am I missing here? What do I need?
Well, if you want to learn about the latest cigars or auto racing
Right.
Statistics.
Well, you know,
or,
I've got that covered. I subscribe to 2 British magazines devoted entirely to motorsports, and I call the Quaker State Speed Line about 2 times a half hour. So now, would the computer give me more than I'm getting that way?
Well, you can find other people who have the same unusual interests you do. And
You mean the troubled loner chat room on the internet?
absolutely.
Okay, so anyway, just the point is like, what is this going to be good for? And we just couldn't imagine. And the same is going to be true for AI. We're going to know a lot more about this a year from now, or even I know I will a couple months from now as I take this into my classroom. So let's start off. I have some questions for Rick. So, Rick, we're reading, hearing, seeing on TV or streaming, a lot about artificial intelligence. Seems to me there's 2 stories. One is this techno-optimist story, that's going to help us solve problems like climate change, addressing crime, education. It's going to revolutionize medical advances. It's going to help us do our jobs better, so we can be more productive, make things easier. But there's also the second story, that this is technology out of control. It's going to be used for surveillance and deep fakes and conspiracy theories. It's going to funnel money into the people who already have lots of money, the tech companies, and others. And so the rich are just going to get richer. So where do you stand on this spectrum between these 2 stories?
Yeah, I think, as the book says, I think that in chapter 1, I think people are kind of letting their imaginations and anxieties get away from them a little bit. I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm leaning more towards a positive use because I look back at the technologies we've already seen, everything from the printing press to the daguerreotype camera to telegraph, telephone. I think the videos you just show how people were a little mystified by all these things, and then they kind of got incorporated into their lives. Even David Letterman's kind of like, have you heard of the recorder? It's like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of things that probably 20 years from now be like, okay, AI is pretty much part of our lives now, but it takes a while and it's disruptive and it does challenge things. That doesn't mean people don't have a right to be anxious. Of course, the movable type printing press sparked massive social upheavals and during the Renaissance and led many people to basically go to war, change religions, etc. It's not like this doesn't cause big disruption. So but it's something to keep in mind is that we've had versions of AI for some time now, since the 1970s, but ChatGPT is definitely a huge advance in this area. It can write some pretty good essays. We've all noticed that. You can write code for computer programs, write songs, produce new artwork. It's doing amazing things. And in chapter 2, they talk about this S curve that happens with technology. AI becomes, kind of gradually a part of our lives in a way that has become this way in a way we didn't notice, just slowly. And all of a sudden, we had CAD, we had Google Maps, we used GPS in our cars. We've gotten all used to that. Those are forms of AI. But when ChatGPT came out, it seemed to accelerate. That's the part of the S curve where things accelerate rather quickly. And if technology goes pretty normally, it'll level out at some point. But right now we're in that acceleration phase and it's pretty disruptive. The question is there something about AI that causes it to be exponentially more disruptive in an ongoing way? And that's kind of the big question. I'm personally guessing it's going to be like most communication technologies, that we'll figure out how to use it, put some policy into place to kind of curb maybe some of its negative impacts. And we'll grow. Sorry about that. Obviously, I've got a storm rolling in. So ultimately, though, I think AI is going to cause us to reframe how we think about literacy and writing. And writing is going to be less about typing words and sentences on a screen and more about how to shape these words, sentences, and paragraphs into kind of a complete multimodal document. So things are going to be different than the double-spaced 1-inch margin essays that we've been using for quite some time. I think we're going to have to change the way we teach students how to write and teach how writing happens.
Okay, but can we focus now on writing and being a writing instructor more? Like, there's all these terms, algorithms, NLPs and LLMs, natural language process, and large language models. And I think probably all of us have a basic understanding of what these terms mean, but it's kind of hard to see the big picture. So how would you describe AI assisted writing and teaching people, teachers like us teaching people, are still a little bit confused about the big picture?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, as it was mentioned, I used to write in the electronics industry for a magazine, and I remember visiting factories, and I'd see people doing repetitive work, mechanical, pretty mindless work, and I'd be like, well, I was always told when I was at these facilities and these factories, well, someday automation's gonna basically do all this stuff. If anytime you see somebody doing something repetitive, mechanical, or mindless, robots should be doing that. And that gives us thoughts about, well, there's certain parts of writing that can be kind of mechanical and repetitive. I mean, grammar, punctuation. I mean, these are all things that probably AI can do. I mean, that's the truth, man. I mean, in fact, that's kind of the major tell on with other students using AI, is that all the punctuation and grammar is pretty clear and working out pretty well. I also think AI is kind of like GPS. I mean, I remember the first time I got a Garmin, I'm like, this is amazing. It's a miracle, that I can just type in an address and it shows me how to get there. Now I'm like a lot of people, I probably can't drive without a Garmin or using Google Maps or Apple Maps. AI works a lot like that. The computer looks at all the possible routes, generally chooses the one that will probably get you your destination, perhaps the fastest. ChatGPT is doing a lot of the same thing, and AI systems like that. It looks at all the information available on a topic, gathers it together, synthesizes it into something that's probably what you're looking for. GPS doesn't always take you the fastest way. It's been trained to give you what might be the best route. So it's not going to take you along gravel paths and everything. It's going to kind of move you over to the interstate. We've all noticed that generally it's like looking for interstates and highways that it can use before it's going to send you down through some small town or something like that. Even if that would have been the fastest way. Yeah.
So Rick, you just said all the information that's out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move to the downsides, though. I mean, I remember reading where somebody said, AI reflects the world as it is, not as we think it should be. So there's structural bias and discrimination in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And these biases are happening and being reproduced in the algorithms, in surveillance and things like that. Conspiracy theorists dream, hallucinations. I mean, some of these are funny. There's the story of somebody was writing, asking about something about a Shakespeare play, and AI made up a character who wasn't in the play because AI, quote, thought, unquote, that the play couldn't work properly without them. It's when you ask it for some things about academic stuff, it will make up academic published articles and even hallucinate the DOIs of things that never existed and that are kind of plausible, but they didn't exist. So as far as that, what are we going to do about students who are just going to want to type in a prompt and then cut and paste, without really taking a critical look at it and without revising and using it responsibly, ethically, transparently?
Yeah, I think we're all concerned about especially bias and discrimination. I mean, what's going on in the healthcare industry is they're seeing that the gender bias and racial biases are kind of baked into the healthcare system, which is very serious. And what do you do about people who are actually putting misinformation out there, trying to deceive people or use conspiracy theories? And I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. I think the book actually has some good strategies for that. It says, no, this is a good opportunity to address these issues of bias and discrimination with students. I mean, actually go and talk about these issues, this form of literacy, especially with internet literacy and online literacy, but just in general, how do you recognize bias? What's the impact of discrimination and negative stereotypes in that way? And how can we determine what's factual evidence and good reasoning and what maybe isn't? It also might be a good time to talk about structural racism and political bias. I mean, these things really, we can try and do as much as we can to take them out of our culture, but they're never going to go completely away. There's no kind of, God's eye view we can get on all these issues. So There's also things we can do too, is narrative elements, how to tell a good story. That's important. How to, that Shakespeare example, I heard that one too. Maybe Shakespeare missed that narrative element. Maybe there's something that should have been in there that today we would expect that to be part of the story. So I think that's good. This is an opportunity as problems surface. I'm hoping we can find a way to teach our students to actually navigate these kind of choppy waters and figure out what to do. I'm also hoping over time that the AI systems will be trained to reduce some of the more extreme efforts to be in there, but we'll see.
Yeah, so, okay, let's talk about the elephant that's in the room. But this is what we're all concerned about, totally understandably and legitimately. How do we get students to do their own work? Academic dishonesty. How do we make sure students aren't using AI to plagiarize? And do we even know what plagiarism is in this new world?
Yeah. No, I'll admit, this is, I think, many of our most concerned. My recurring nightmare is that we're going to have students handing in papers written completely by AI, and then we're going to be grading them with AI, and no human ever gets involved in the whole process, and students get a grade for not doing much, and we get paid for also not doing much. I'm concerned that down the line, that means that we're not getting paid anymore, but I actually don't think that's going to work. I actually think that's not how it's going to go. I think there's some strategies that have time-honored strategies, actually. I think we can write better assignments that use current or local topics, current events or local topics. That's one way to get students to engage in the, rhetorical situations around them, and not just, always be writing about those big national topics like, gun control and abortion and things like that. That said, if you want to do those national topics like that, teach students how to use new angles. New topics are rare, as I tell my students, but new angles are almost always available. What's going on recently that makes this story, this issue important right now? I know you're probably going to talk about this a little bit too, but including reflection as a component of the assignment. If you're going to have them use AI, or at least use it to assist them in some way, actually ask them how they did it. Be transparent. Say, I need to know how you were doing this so I have a better sense of how people are using it. I just was talking to one of my doctoral students who's teaching this summer, and and he asked his class, he said, okay, just be honest here, how many people have used AI to write papers? And every one of the students raised their hands. So he's just kind of like, let's just be honest here in this way. So the best way to kind of do it, you can prohibit it, but I have a feeling, students are going to work around that. Maybe we can lean into this in a way and let them use it for some things. I think, beginning assignments in class, doing pre-writing activities in the classroom.
And what about plagiarism checkers?
Yeah,
there's a bunch of them that are being touted out there.
I think that's an issue that, I'm concerned about false negatives and accusing students of doing it. I mean, if the olden days, and I'm going to go way back before we had the internet for this stuff, which I lived in that period, but you'd sit down, you ask students, you'd be like, I see you use the word ontological. What does that mean? You know what I mean? And that way, and students who are, the definition of plagiarism is handing in work that is not your own. It's not copy and pasting things and putting them in, and handing them in that way. So asking students that, sometimes they've put in some collaborative, some complex ideas. You mentioned that gun violence is endemic to our society and therefore should be reframed as a public health issue. What do you mean by framing, and what would it be to reframe, and how would you go about reframing an issue in terms of public health? If the students often kind of blanch at that point, you're like, yeah, I don't think this is really your work. It looks like even if I'm allowing you to use some AI, you've got to know what you're handing in and what you're doing. Then I think there's a certain amount of insisting that they cite their sources, integrate them into the text. Some of the old-fashioned stuff that we've been doing for many years to kind of tip that off. I'll admit my concern is with these plagiarism checkers is that you're going to get a lot of false negatives, and you're going to spend
false positives. You mean
false positive? I mean, you're going to get spend the whole semester fighting with your students about what they've plagiarized and what they haven't.
Yeah, it just seems to me it's going to be an arms race between the plagiarism checkers, and it's a fool's errand in the end. I think I agree with you. Okay, so let's finishing up. So you keep using the word pivot, reframe. Okay, how do we do that? And specifically, we've talked mostly about the risk, but what can we do right now? Fall 2023 is right around the corner. So, what can we instructors do right now to, gain the potential benefits and also deal with the risks?
Yeah, I think that the book talks about outsourcing doing, not your thinking. Outsource your doing, not your thinking. That's a pretty typical AI kind of advice to give people. And that, there's lots of things that involve doing. I'd say in writing, that's grammar, punctuation. Sometimes it's revising things into plain style, maybe even generating, finding sources and things like that. That's kind of doing that I think, maybe AI can do. Does that make sense? I mean, these are things maybe we can allow the AI to. I even had a graduate student recently who's a second language speaker finishing her dissertation. I said, why don't you try, just using Grammarly to kind of work out the, some of the punctuation and colloquialisms and stuff. And I want her to keep her own language and her own, her own, I'm drawing a blank on what I was going to say there. Yeah, her own voice and stuff. But on the other hand, there's things that I thought that something like Grammarly could actually kind of help her with to kind of get this into shape that we could deposit it. I think we can go back to some regular things like free writing in class. I think that's a good idea. That's what we used to do, and don't just send them home with an assignment, because then they're going to start with AI. They actually start in the class and get them writing in there. There's tools like metaphorical framing that AI doesn't do very well. And I guess I'd have to explain that in more depth, but how to reframe issues, how to interrogate metaphors and such. Narrative, our stories need to be better storytellers with this reality that we're in, and maybe we can put more time into, interpreting narratives and meta narratives, and interrogating them in some way. So there's a variety of ways. I don't know, Chuck, let me throw that back at you. Do you have some ideas?
Well, okay, I'm gonna turn to the book, the AI Classroom book, and I'm gonna talk about. Let's see if I can get to it. About this is in part 2 of the book. It's all over the place. I think they have something promptology, prompt craft or something is what they call it. It's like how to write a prompt and how to evaluate a prompt. And so they have these 2 heuristics that I've been playing around with, and I think are pretty good. This first one, the prep, helps you. How do you write a good prompt so that you get, so the output is relevant to you and important. And then also more important, but I'm not going to really talk too much about it here today, is this edit prompt. And that's a diagnostic for evaluating, the accuracy, the bias of the prompt, the emotional tone of the prompt that we can help our students run through. And I think if we teach them to use these things wisely, they will see that they're a tool, and they can use them, again, ethically, responsibly, transparently. So the prep prompt is like, and this works really well, I've found. Introduce the question with a prompt, with a verb and a noun. Give AI a role. You are such and such in this situation. Be really explicit in your instruction and give it specific parameters. So I'm gonna show you a couple of, well, actually, and again, I'm not going to look too much at this edit prompt, but this is the edit diagnostic, which looks really good to me. I haven't used this in my classroom. I'm going to go all in with this stuff in my classrooms next semester and see how it works. But for today, because I think the first step for me anyway, and I think maybe for you all, it is to it's to feel comfortable with it yourself. And I'm going to just tell my students, look, I'm figuring this out with you. You're going to be the experts. You're going to help me figure this out. We're going to figure it out together. So I came up with a few prompts for using AI, specifically ChatGPT, to make professors' job maybe go a little bit more smoothly. Okay, so what I did, I asked it this. Okay, so this is using prep to generate ideas for a classroom activity. So this was what I wrote. Okay, create a classroom activity to help students understand what topic sentences are and how to develop their own. Role, and you don't have to include role here. It pretty much figures it out. You're a college professor teaching first-year composition at a community college. Explicit. The activity should have 4 parts. Professor gives mini lecture on topic sentences and they're important. Students work in small groups, etc. Students share their work. Professor lists the takeaway points, parameters. The entire activity should take 40 minutes. Here's what it gave me. Now, is it perfect? Would I take this to my class and just use it whole hog? Of course I wouldn't do that. However, it's very specific. I mean, for one thing, it tends to give things titles, which I didn't tell it to give it a title. Crafting strong sentences. It even comes up with a objective. And again, I wouldn't just take this, into the class and just read it like a script, but it's a good start. And it's also very thorough. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't prepare my classroom activities anything like this. So that's one way it can be helpful. Let's look at another drudgery example here. Okay. You say you want to do a grammar quiz, and I don't do a lot of grammar in my class, but even my seniors, who are all pretty good writers, still have grammar issues, and sometimes we'll spend 5 minutes in class just talking about various grammar issues. So I gave it this prompt: create a quiz on dangling modifiers. You're a college professor teaching first-year writing students. The quiz should have 10 questions, parameters. The questions should vary in form, including multiple choice, identifying the grammar issue, rewriting a sentence, and short answer. And not bad. I mean, look, this is a quiz, and I would look through this to make sure that there's no bias here. But every one of these, is actually a good example of a dangling modifier. By the way, the grammar checkers I've found are not very good at identifying dangling modifiers. Not that that's a huge, big problem, but okay, that's just one way to do a quiz. Okay, now, another thing you can do is using the prompt to create a text for students to critique in class. So this is one Rick and I did, and it was pretty interesting. Write a review of the HBO series The Last of Us, focusing on the episode Long, Long Time. You are a college student who is writing the review for the school newspaper. The review should focus on the episode's portrayal of same-sex relationships. Parameters: the review should have 400 to 500 words. Okay, so what did it do? Well, it gave it a title, a hauntingly, like maybe a little over the top, a hauntingly beautiful journey, The Last of Us episode, Long, Long Time review. And then look how it begins. I mean, The Last of Us series on HBO has captivated audiences with its gritty post-apocalyptic world and emotionally charged storytelling. The episode, anyway. And so it goes on and on. And one thing that Rick and I noticed it puts it in 5 paragraphs here, is that it actually does a remarkably, surprisingly good job at doing the moves of a review. However, you would ask your students, like, okay, does this sound like a human being actually wrote it? I mean, is this just generic stuff? Does it look like it's been plugged in? I mean, for one thing, ChatGPT apparently didn't watch it. I mean, because there's no specific examples of what happens. It's just all these generalities.
Yeah.
And so it's a good one to critique. Sorry, Rick, go ahead.
No, it's pretty mechanical. I mean, I think that's kind of a tell on some things like this, is that it's pretty clear that there's no interaction with the movie. Does that make sense? I mean, there's no reflection. It's just, I don't know, it feels very generic, and that's something you can point out to students. That's what this will do for you. It doesn't feel authentic. It feels like a summary of what other reviewers have said.
Yeah, and again, this is sort of part of that edit critique. Does it sound like a human being actually wrote this? And this doesn't. when you read it closely. But there's some interesting stuff here. It could be very, a good activity. Okay, prompts for editing. I'm going to tell you a story. It does a good job of editing. I mean, it really does. And I'll tell you a story. This was a graduate student in psychology who was taking my proposals class, and she was doing a interventional field study on grooming, and she wanted to understand in this research that was IRB approved, how well second graders and third graders could identify grooming behavior. So she had to get permission from the students' parents, who were ordinary people. Matter of fact, it was at a school, where a lot of the people are second language speakers. So, so this is what she gave us, and this is very good. This is very good writing. The IRB approved it. This is informed consent. She's telling this is exactly what the study's for. These are the risks, etc. But we just talked about, like, you know what? Your average parent can't understand this. It's very good writing for writing to the IRB or the to researchers, but informed consent means that they need to understand it. Okay, so can ChatGPT help us? Okay, we sat down and we wrote, edit the following passage for clarity and concision. You are a researcher who is recruiting parents to allow their second graders to participate in a study. The paragraph should more briefly express this paragraph. Write this at a 5th grade reading level for readers for whom English is not their first language. It does. We are both impressed. This study looks at how well 3rd grade kids and the parents in Albuquerque can spot and stop people who try to groom them for abuse. Some grown-ups remember being sexually hurt when they were young, and this can cause problems when they grow up, like feeling sad or scared a lot, or even getting in trouble with the law. This is a big problem that needs to be stopped, so we need to find ways to help kids stay safe. There's a lot of things that, were not exactly right with this, but this gave her a lot of ideas, and she was able to produce a document that was, easier to understand, and that actually allowed her to recruit quite a few parents. So, and I was surprised by how good this was.
So Chuck, one of our people is asking, did this pass the IRB, or has this not gotten through the IRB?
Well, what's funny is that the first one did, even though it was written in language that that these people were not gonna, a lot of them anyway, were not gonna understand.
Yeah,
It's written in psychology research talk, and you know what? I haven't been in touch with her since June. So and she was redoing it, and I assume since things changed, she had to take it back to the IRB. I think I don't know. She probably would have told me if it wasn't. So
yeah, I don't know. I'm curious too. So
yeah,
we've had quite a few questions in the chat. So I don't know. We'll take some time and answer some of these. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So we did that. Yeah. So yeah. What else? Resources.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you get started? Okay. These are some classroom strategies to use, but I wanted to point out these are 2 resources plus a couple of others that, I think are really good to get started. One is the MLA 4C's Joint Task Force on Writing an AI Working Paper. Overview the issues, statements, and principles and recommendations. It's at mla.org. It's probably at 4C's too. And then another one on the WAC Clearinghouse, AI text generators and teaching writing starting points for inquiry. There is just, first of all, I want to say that the MLA 4C's Joint Task Force statement, I think from what I can see, it aligns with what Rick and I have been saying. They warn about grammar checkers. I think it's really good about talking about the benefits and risks to students, to writing teachers, and to writing programs, and to do that in a balanced way. And then there's just these, if students are gonna be transparent about their AI use. They need to know how to cite it. I mean, I just Googled this. Well, I Googled something like this. How do I cite a generative AI in MLA style? And that's the name of the page. And same thing in APA style. So you're going to want to help them do this. Here's what the MLA Joint Task Force looks like. And as you can see that it's really good. I want to just say that the work cited and further reading alone, or, you know, they're worth the price of admission. There's a lot of really good stuff here that, you know, you can go down a rabbit hole and be consumed for a week. But I think it's a really good way to start. Again, it's the MLA 4C's Joint Task Force on Writing an AI Working Paper. The other one is, okay, well, this is what they say. By the way, they use this term critical AI literacy, which which is emerging in writing studies as the right term. And here's how they define it. I'll go ahead and read this. By critical AI literacy, we mean not just how AI models work, but also about the risks, rewards, capacities, and complication of AI tools. Critical AI literacy is now part of digital literacy, and students and teachers should be made aware of bias and inaccuracy in model output, and the particular vulnerability of students who may not yet have sufficient expertise to critically evaluate language model outputs, including seeing them as sentient. Okay, and there's a lot of really, really good stuff in here. The other one that I look at is here's the one on the WAC clearinghouse. This is Anna Mills is running this thing. There's just a lot of great stuff here. There's the shared resources, opportunities to engage and participate. I've highlighted a couple that I think might be particularly helpful. The experimental essays created with OpenAI's ChatGPT-3. It's actually an Excel spreadsheet that just has lots and lots of examples of things that they've done. One of the prompts was about write a reflection, and I thought there's no way it can do it. Yeah, and again, it was robotic, but it was a good start. And then also, I just want to point out, there's this listserv, the AI generators and teaching writing listserv that you can join. So let's see. And anyway, that's all I got. Did I have any questions? More questions, Rick?
I thought we'd see if our moderators had collected some questions.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But just before we do it, we are kind of looking forward to the future. It's going to change the way we write and how we do our jobs as teachers. I don't think we can, and Chuck and I don't have all the answers, that's for sure. We're just crawling into this ourselves and feeling around in the dark. But I do think that, maybe I've always asked students, students will always tell you, well, you ask them, well, what's going on? I don't like to write. I'm not good at it. And I'm always like, well, what don't you like to write? And I always find that the things they don't like to write are grammar, punctuation. They don't know why their teacher keeps writing wordy in the margins, stuff like that. I'm all like, and I got there, and they often end up staring at a blank screen and not sure what they're going to put down. And I'm thinking, AI may be able to help with a lot of those kinds of things. That's the kind of mechanical stuff that's part of writing. I know we all consider that important. It is. But I also think that maybe it makes it a little bit easier for students to get going and get things, at least somewhat at a level that they feel they're doing good writing. And that allows us to put more effort into those higher order activities like creativity, critical thinking, cultural awareness, paying attention to diversity and aesthetics. At least I'm hoping so. I'm hoping to take some of that low order stuff kind of helps with that, so then students feel like they're having more fun and being creative, because that's what they like. I'm like, well, I'd say, what do you like about writing? And they say, well, I like being creative. That's what I like. I want to do new things, and I'm hoping that's where this all goes, but we'll have to see. Anyway, let's see if there were some people who wanted to chime in and ask some questions or make a comment.
Well, Rick and Chuck, there's a little bit of a side conversation going on in the chat about Turnitin. So didn't know if you wanted to add some comments on that, if you were planning on using it.
I know, Chuck, this is a minefield to go through, but you got some ideas on this?
No, I'm not. I've never been a fan of those. I just use, the Council for Writing Program Administrator has maybe I should have cited this, dealing with plagiarism, preventing it, and what to do if you suspect plagiarism. I've been following those best practices for quite a while. And I no longer run the writing program. I'm a civilian now, but so that's an old biography. But when I was, it was what we did in the program. I also, by the way, I'm very wary of using this to assess writing, and or even give it a grade. People are talking about that. That's one thing the book does a little bit of, is talking about assessing writing. As of now, I'm still uncomfortable with that. I think it might help me get a good start on, like, okay, what am I going to say to this student? But right now, I'm not going to go there. And I think there's a lot of dangers. I think we want our students to be using AI, if anything, for self-assessment. So that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, no, I feel the same. I'm worried. I mean, I've used Turnitin and other plagiarism checkers. I mean, as all of us have. I'm just afraid of the false positives. I don't want to be accusing students of doing something and then, so I often, Chuck and I are longtime writing program administrators at big universities. So we're used to dealing with plagiarism issues. And it really is the old fashioned ways of just asking them, how did you get this information? Where'd this come from? Stuff like that. What's this word mean? That actually seems to be more effective in a lot of ways than Turnitin, which always seems to give you a high hit count on this is all plagiarized. You're like, well, I don't know, they're citing sources. But I don't know what ChatGPT is going to do, because imagine once all these ChatGPT generated things are going in, everything's going to look like it's been plagiarized after a while. So not sure what we're going to do about all that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how, as I said, I'm not sure how. I think we have to define plagiarism a little bit differently, and don't ask me how that would be, but
yeah, we're gonna have to figure that out. Let's see, privacy issues somebody's asking about. Yeah, I should just point out, I was also talking with one of our grad students just today who's interning, and he said that they're at a tech company and they're like everyone has to stay off ChatGPT. And I thought, well, how long is that going to last? Because they're afraid of intellectual property issues. And I think that's absolutely true, but I have no answer to that, because I also think prohibition is just not going to work. I mean, you're telling me these engineers at these companies aren't going to be like, of course I want to write my proposal report with AI assistance. I know, and privacy. Yeah, I mean, what about how much data is going to be generated on a student that submits a paper to have it edited or looked over? Chuck, you got some ideas on that?
I agree. I mean, but these are big political issues that if we need our politicians and other people to address if they can. The students are gonna be using these things, right? So prohibition, I just think is a fool's errand, and I teach them how to use it, and yeah, I agree. It's a big issue.
Yeah. Hey, I'm seeing Joe Piela's on the line. We should ask him, talk about somebody with gobs of experience. So, Joe, you say teachers are going to have to design assignments that do not invite plagiarism. Absolutely. I think that's what's that? What's that? Oh, I just it's great to hear. It's great to hear.
Hey, it's great to see you guys and hear from you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sorry, I'm echoing for some reason, but we're gonna have to design those assignments that don't invite plagiarism. I think Joe's absolutely right on that. And that involves, like I said, local issues, very current issues, and then coming up with new angles in some way. But that's not going to be a panacea for everything, but at least it's but those are old style, that's been around for a long time that we've been doing that. If you want plagiarized material, write some generic thing about a topic to a generic audience, and that's been done thousands of times before. And guess what? Even back before the internet, students had whole collections of papers written for that they could plagiarize and hand in. So, I mean, that's nothing new. And people used to pay for papers back then too, written by someone else, so it's just, we're just gonna have to get better at writing these assignments and to get original work. Let's see, do we have, I'm sorry, I'm looking through the chat trying to get questions.
Oh, David Kubota points out that, the only way to deal with this, not with plagiarism checkers, but he says, but the one-on-one conference in which instructors ask questions via discourse seems like the only trusted method. I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think also checking in on their work, as they're progressing towards finishing the paper, and some of that can be done in the classroom. You might have them handed in. I mean, there's just ways of checking in to make sure you're not getting a fully formed ChatGPT version that was written an hour before, that was composed an hour before they need to hand it in. These are old style tactics, but I think they still, they're pretty realistic too. So yeah, other question. I mean, is there a topic that we haven't covered that people want to chat about?
Or people can unmute and just talk.
Yeah. Well, looks like not sure. Yeah, not sure if folks are coming in, but anyway, yeah, I know it's a lot of people, and so if we're going to have people talk about it, so no, we appreciate everyone coming, and if you have some questions, Chuck and did I put our email address up there at the end? Can you send us questions?
Yeah, there we go.
And God forbid we don't have all the answers, that's for sure, but
yeah,
we're trying to navigate this. Chuck and I are both walking into a classroom in 1 month, right? And we got to figure out what we're going to do. The spring we were kind of like, let's see what happens, but now we're hoping we'll have some better, be able to deal with this a little bit more informed in a way. And I think this book that we read and talked about for the book club actually, does some nice things and gives some good ideas in an accessible way.
Most of their examples are K through 12. However, I think the principles work, and will work for at least for your first year of writing, and even for more advanced writers.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I don't know, do our folks from Pearson have some last minute things to put forward, or
are people gonna have access to these materials? How will they do that?
Oh, you mean like the PowerPoint, or?
Yeah, the PowerPoint or the presentation. They will, right?
Yeah.
Rachel or Kate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. I know I did. We will follow up with everyone that attended and share the PowerPoint deck that was used today, as well as Rick and Chuck's email addresses if you have further questions for them, and the recording to this session too.
If you're going to write to us, make sure you use a subject line that doesn't look like spam. So.
And we'll get back to you, okay? All right.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. This was, Rick and I had a good time putting it together, and we learned a lot. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank